In response to vague threats given by the White House to one Pope Leo, he has decided to seek the counsel of David Axelrod, a former Obama staffer. A private meeting with very, very public implications that's blended into a larger back and forth between the White House and the Vatican, sparking political tension between the two. And from all of this, many are wondering, could a pope be president? The short answer, yes, but it's very unlikely. The only on-paper requirements are that you must be over the age of 35 and be born in America. However, it's easily assumed that the Founding Fathers didn't write any further provisions because they couldn't have fathomed that. I don't think a Pope president was on their mind in any capacity. But really what this dilemma brings up is a bigger conversation about the role and history of Catholicism in America, when it's been at odds with the US and when it's worked in tandem with the United States government, something that we're seeing more and more today. With the majority of our current Supreme Court being Catholic, our vice president being Catholic, our last Democratic president being Catholic, and anywhere from 21 to 25% of the American population at large being Catholic, it's fair to say that America's future is absolutely going to be intertwined with the Roman Church. But what does that mean politically? What does that mean for the American public? And what does that mean for political actors who historically don't like Catholicism, who may have a religious conviction against Catholicism? What does it mean for times in which the American government is going against Catholic sentiment and the public has taken the side of the Catholic Church over the government? Well, these are all questions that would have come to mind if we had asked them to our founding fathers, and now they're questions we're asking ourselves. And while there's a myriad of answers, there's a myriad of ways to look at the problem, different opinions throughout American history in regards to Catholics, one question remains the same. Without answer, with only speculation, but with a lot of history and a lot of intrigue. Simply put, could a pope be president? Folks, welcome back to The Narrative with me, your host, Vrillium, the host of the most and the most papal decrees. Guys, I think we've all been seeing what's been happening between Rome and DC. Yes, in a surprising turn of events, the Catholic Church is now at odds with the White House. It is a gangs in New York fever dream if there ever was one. I covered very recently that Pope Leo had some choice words to say to the White House in regards to its conflicts in the Middle East, words that have only gotten more and more choicier as attacks have continued to occur on Lebanon, a very heavily Christian populated area, basically all of those Christians being Catholic, and the famous Maronite Church of Lebanon having a very, very deep tie to the Vatican and a very deep place of importance in the Vatican. However, the White House did not respond to these comments with grace and forgiveness or apology, but rather with choice threats against the Pope, with the Pentagon summoning Pope Leo's top American diplomat and threatening him. Very Deus Vult of you, Peter. Now, of course, every MAGA slopfluencer has now been shilling like 1800s level anti-Catholic sentiment, which is funny because it was just the other day they were talking about how base J.D. Vance's Catholic faith is and how he's such an American patriot because of his Catholic faith, and yet now we're back to Bill the Butcher level anti-papist sentiment. And of course, all of this ties into a grander conversation because, let it be known, the America First contingent, the my side, if you will, is very noticeably Catholic and openly, avowedly, and proudly Catholic. I myself am not, which puts me in the minority amongst my contemporaries. Contemporaries like One Faith Merrill, friend of the show, who was hit with an absolute fatal kosher combo after tweeting this now viral and infamous tweet. I mean, literally all of the usual suspects completely lost their fucking minds over this. And granted, I don't think they did so because of their avowed Protestant faith. I highly doubt that Captive Dreamer has a lot of opinions on sola scriptura, but it has been pointing out a conversation that mimics conversations that used to be had surrounding Catholicism in America. And this is because, and I've said it before, we are reaching a new American era. I mean, much of America could be split into eras. Our colonial to First Republic era, the Ellis Island era, the Cold War Heart-Cellar era, and now today. An era that has not been defined and I can't name because it's only just begun, and yet what happens in it is up to us as the people. All of this begs a bigger question about the political history of Catholicism in America. What was its relationship to early America, to mid-century America, and what's going to be its relationship to modern and future America? Well, to understand that, we have to take a look at the history, and we have to go all the way back to before we even had a White House to argue over. But before we do that, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified whenever I make a new post. All that. Let's take a trip now to a dangerous, untamed, tumultuous, and chaotic place that we call Maryland. And people don't realize that the colony of Maryland was founded as a Catholic colony. I'm not kidding. Not like it was founded as a colony that the people who founded it just happened to be Catholic. No, it was founded specifically for Anglo-Catholics, specifically as a place for them to go to escape persecution in England, obviously a Protestant Anglican nation. However, upon arriving, they specifically put into the laws there that there was going to be religious tolerance. Actually, Maryland was the first colony, if not really the first, Western entity to have that level of religious tolerance, specifically that one's denomination of Christianity was protected in the 1649 Act Concerning Religion. Now, unfortunately, very shortly after that, the place would get overrun by Protestant British colonists, and by 1702, the entire Catholic protectorship was overthrown, and the Anglican Church was made the official church of Maryland. But it was a good try, to say the least. And that remained in their cultural heritage, and it remains in the state's heritage well into today. Now, on the eve of the American Revolution, only 25,000 Catholics were living in the country. And we can assume from history and sources that the public's perception of Catholicism was probably on par with that of other Protestant nations at the time and their opinions on Catholics, most notably the English and their opinions on Catholics. That changed, though, with the revolution. See, as much as we love to talk about the revolution and the sort of will to power nature of our people and all this, and talk about how great it was that we fought these immeasurable odds, it's undeniable that we did so with the backing of the French. So not a very will to power guerrilla fighter moment there. But mind you, the France that helped us overthrow England was the pre-revolution France. So the very, very Catholic monarchical France. And so George Washington made it a point in the army to say that you were not allowed to make fun of Catholics. You're not allowed to profess anti-Catholic sentiment. None of these things, because he feared that he would alienate his political allies. But this alliance of Catholics fighting alongside Protestants against another group of Protestants, well, this bred a sort of new understanding of the role of Catholicism in America, and this famously warmed relations, allowing for the Declaration of Independence to go on and be signed by a myriad of people, including one Catholic. Famously, Charles Carroll of Carrollton, you can already guess how important he was, the wealthiest man in America, was a Catholic. God, I wish we could go back to that, huh? Ugh. Anyways, he was a huge sponsor of the war effort and the only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence. And our founding fathers had mixed opinions. I mean, it's honestly, anytime someone tells you the founding fathers felt this way about X, they're probably lying, because the founding fathers never agreed on anything, but they were just fairly ambivalent on them, with their concerns about Catholic rights mostly being founded in their Enlightenment ideals, like Thomas Jefferson or James Madison, who were more so concerned with the Enlightenment idea of secularism rather than the actual well-being of the Catholic Church. Sounds fine, right? I don't see a problem. This sounds great. Seems like everybody got along. It all worked out in the end. What's the big deal? Surely nothing could change the setup. This sounds great. Majority Protestant population, minority Catholic population, had a little bit of beef, but you know what? They solved it. It's fine, and everybody's happy. Our rights are protected, and nothing needs to get complicated. Right? Now, one could really argue that the relationship of the American government and Catholicism starts here in this second era, in the Ellis Island era. 1820 all the way to the 1850s, America was fundamentally changed via immigration through Ellis Island. Funny enough, actually, Ellis Island only ever processed 12 million immigrants. So, That's kind of tough to hear, isn't it? Fundamentally life-changing and socially debasing immigration movement was 12 million people over 62 years. Meanwhile, Biden let in 10, completely undocumented in 4 years. So not looking good. Not looking good. I had to throw that in there. I'm sorry. I try not to get political in that sense, but like, that's not good. But yes, Ellis Island completely redefined our country. It did. And anybody who says it didn't is a product of that redefinition. Because the people at that time certainly felt it. The people at that time certainly felt it. This is because obviously with that immigration, not only did Catholicism come into our country, it came into our country because of ethnic divisions. It came because the ethnicities that were coming into our country were of a Catholic background. The Irish, the Italians, and the Germans. More specifically, the Irish and the Italians, with the most controversial at its time originally being the Irish. I mean, seriously, I joke about it a lot, but Gangs in New York does like a really good job of just depicting all of this. And the reason I say that is because the Anglo-Irish divide in America, that was the start of like meaningful ethnic politics in America. What do I mean by that? This is because in the 1840s and 50s, this is when the know-nothings would form. You know, that cool flag that you see? You know, that's not just a Nick Fuentes thing. That's actually a real historical image, a real historical flag that was used by the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner, a secret fraternal society that would later become known as the Know-Nothings. I did a clip about this. Basically, they're called the Know-Nothings because they instructed members who usually were in high society or in politics. They were instructed to tell people that they didn't know anything about it if they were asked about their affiliation with this party. And eventually it became so common that all of these Anglo-Protestant well-to-do men would claim that they knew nothing that eventually the party just became known as the Know-Nothing Party. Eventually they became so popular that they could just publicly talk about these things that they eventually created the American Party, an actual like third-party contender. And it was one of the only times in which a third party in America actually performed fairly well, sweeping over 9 governorships and legislative seats, 1.5 million members, and held state office in 6 state governments. Like, this is arguably the most successful third party of all time, and its sole thing was the idea that Catholicism could not be in America. That was its thing. Their justifications being both religious, ethnic, and political. They argued that because Catholics serve the Vatican and believe in the primacy of the Pope, meaning the infallibility of the Pope, that they could not truly possess American loyalty or engage in American politics because nothing they would ever do could be seen through a secular lens, and they would always serve the Pope over the president. This was their main fear. A fear that became so sensationalized that there were literally entire conspiracy networks in America arguing that all of these Irish people were being sent by the Pope to take over America and like steal America's, like, I don't know, steam engines. I don't know. However, the Know-Nothings collapsed over the question of American slavery. This is because the Civil War was starting to ramp up, and obviously the northern Know-Nothings didn't like slavery, but the southern ones really liked slavery. And so now they're breaking up, and Abraham Lincoln's Republican Party sweeps in and takes all of the former electorate, and that's really where the Know-Nothings end. But the story doesn't just end there. Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't get buried outside of Manhattan, and now that's the end of the story. No, it continues onward. See, people don't realize that sentiment, that anti-Catholic sentiment, stayed for a very, very long time. A lot of people wonder why from this era there's all these like alternative structures in America that are Catholic. Think Catholic schools, Catholic hospitals, Catholic organizations, etc., etc. It's because they were kind of formed out of necessity after waves of anti-Catholic violence against school children, usually from other school children, but also sometimes like from adults attacking Catholic school children. Let me note that, okay? Mid-America was a fucking weird place. The Catholic Church would go on to establish the Catholic school system. That's why there's Catholic schools in America. They basically said we're going to segregate ourselves away from the Protestant mainstream, and so then we can exist like peacefully and safely. All of this actually coming top down from the Vatican in a real and legal way. But what else came from this? What else would this alternative infrastructure in America create? Now we have this situation wherein the Catholic population of America at this time, very fresh, distrusted by the mainstream, they start creating their own infrastructure. But what if that could be translated into politics? What if that could be translated into governance? This is where we get the creation of Tammany Hall. You might remember Tammany Hall from the most boring part of your middle school or high school history class, but it actually was like wildly important and we don't talk about it enough. Now, Tammany Hall, that's just the word we use for a political machine. A political machine is just a series of organizations, a series of systems that allow for a certain political end result. See, Tammany Hall, under bosses like one William Boss Tweed, what they would do is they'd basically set up like an alternative welfare, an alternative service system for usually immigrants, but more specifically for Catholic immigrants in exchange for their votes. And by the way, this has been the Democrat model ever since. You want to know why there was such a notable shift in the Democrat Party in terms of values and who it is they're aligning themselves with? It's because of this. Tammany Hall basically figured out, okay, if we have all these new people coming in and they're allowed to vote and we help them out, get them jobs, give them food, etc., in exchange for their vote, well, then they'll vote for us and we can keep winning. And that's how the Democrat Party, that's how they took hold of Manhattan into today. You ever wonder why, when you think of like the police department or the fire department or whatever else, you think of like Irish guys, think of Irish cops, Irish firefighters? It's because those are government jobs. And what Tammany Hall was able to do was they would get into power, and then to return the favor for all the votes that they just got from these immigrants, they'd put the immigrants into those jobs. So Irish Catholics come in, Tammany Hall sets them up, gets them food, says, hey, vote for us. The Irish immigrants, they vote for Tammany Hall candidates. Tammany Hall candidates become Tammany Hall politicians, use their political power, make them into firefighters, get them jobs, whatever. This is why it's called a political machine or political system, you see? And this was just the structure of Catholicism in America for a very, very long time. They kind of formed a second country within our country. This is also why they largely stayed in city areas, because that's where the jobs were, and they just stayed around there and ended up becoming so politically instrumental to the area that they had no reason to leave or to join in expansions. What needs to be noted that makes all of this very, very important is the fact that there was always a desire to enter into American society. That's the key difference that people don't realize. All of this alternative structure that was being built, it feels very reminiscent of a certain group, doesn't it? And the relationship between migrant and politician, it feels very reminiscent of something we're seeing today, doesn't it? Yes, we're still seeing these things. I don't think I have to tell you that. I don't think I have to tell you that, yes, we are still seeing these things. Just all new players, basically. The difference is that the Irish and the Italians and the Catholics, they eventually joined into American society. Eventually, they utilized these things not as a means for self-enrichment or self-aggrandizing, but instead to create just genuine living conditions for themselves, which eventually would go on to create a more pluralistic, more diverse, and more powerful America in the right way, like in the good way. With now today, when you think of an American, many times you're probably thinking of like an Irish Catholic. But see, that threatens a certain political order that's been established in our country. It threatens a certain political order that's been established over all of our institutions that explicitly hates Catholicism on both this political grounds as well as like very, very old religious grounds. And so this is where this conversation is coming from. But all of that lends itself to where we are today and what comes next. Remember the know-nothings that I told you about? Remember? Anti-Catholic, pro-Protestant, anti-Irish organization. Yeah, that wasn't founded by a Protestant American European man. It was founded by Louis Charles Levin. Yes, Levin. He was Jewish. And it's pretty fair to assume the guy didn't have a distaste for Catholics because of a disagreement on sola scriptura. In his mind, all of the New Testament is wrong. All of Christianity is wrong in his eyes. No, he feared that historic opinions of Catholicism would come into the country, historic opinions surrounding his group. See, Protestantism has very famously been very, very kind, very, very forgiving, and very, very friendly towards Levin's group. I mean, just the other day we covered Christian Zionism, but of course he utilized, this sentiment, this Protestant nativism to like get his way politically and was able to achieve his political aims. And so, unfortunately our guys back then didn't have Wikipedia, so they couldn't really tell who was who. But now we know that, yeah, that's probably why he started the Know Nothing Party. I highly doubt he was actually concerned with the Protestant character of the nation. We're seeing that again today because now all of the young conservatives are Catholic. All of them are against Israel. All of them follow Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens. Many of them are like even more extreme than those people. Like those people are not that extreme. And one of the big things that the Catholic integration into America proves, the idea that no, you don't have to remain a second nation, that things like the ADL, APAC, all these things aren't necessary. The argument for a very long time, well, it's our heritage association, it's our culture, it's our, how else are we going to survive as a minority in this country? What's wrong with us organizing together? You know, we want to be able to survive. But the American Catholic story shows that, yeah, you can do that, but then you fall in line. Then you become one of us, and then it's fine. Like I said before in another video, we elected Joe Biden as the second Catholic president, and no one even talked about it. Like there was a time in this country in which a Catholic president would cause an absolute panic across the country, and yet we elected Joe Biden as the second Catholic president. No one even questioned it. And so this is what I mean. When you look at the Catholic story, all of a sudden the continued existence and power of something like the ADL doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? All of a sudden, the fact that you can have dual loyalty in America, that you can have ethnic and immigrant-based loans, all of a sudden, that doesn't make a lot of sense anymore because, like, these people did that, and now they're with us. So I get it as like a stepping stone, but now we're here. So why are you still doing that? This is a conversation they absolutely do not want us to have. And yet it's a conversation that's going to continue growing because, like I said, Catholicism has a real presence now. Arguably now it has like an even more empowered presence, and yet the people professing it are patriotic. Now more than ever, if there really was some plan for the Vatican to take over America, it would be more than possible right now. Not only has America become significantly Catholic with nearly a quarter of us being Catholic, it's virtually surrounded by Catholic countries all along the Western Hemisphere. And yet no, all of the big Catholic voices, those are the patriotic voices, and all of the dissenting voices, well, those are the Israel first voices. And so it shows to us that assimilation is a real thing that can occur. It just doesn't occur when you keep yourself from it. It doesn't occur when you force your community away from it. It doesn't occur when you forcibly put yourself above others. Do you see why that's a little bit threatening to our current political order? And yet it's a conversation that's going to continue happening nonetheless. Because again, like I said, the future we're barreling towards is one where America becomes Romanized. America is more likely to become majority Catholic before it is majority not European. This is all to say that just like how it was with the Know Nothing Party, where a subversive is attempting to utilize a distinction to gain his way, we're seeing the same thing right now. The people going against someone like a Faith Merrill, they're not doing it because they disagree with her opinion on the Eucharist. People rallying against a Nick Fuentes, they're not doing it because they disagree with their opinion on papal primacy. It's very clear and very obvious reason. The story of Catholicism in America is the story of America in America. This is what the story could be like. This is how things could be. This is how we could make it work. And yet we won't, because those in power cannot assimilate. If they were to assimilate, they'd no longer be themselves. They would no longer have their peoplehood, their international presence, and therefore they would no longer have their power. And that's a threat to them. And so the final answer to the question is very simple. Could a pope be president? Well, why the hell would he want to be? But folks, that's going to do it for us today on this episode of The Narrative. I hope that you enjoyed. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow. I mean, come on, all that, guys. I can't promise you a job at the fire department if you do, but I can promise that 3 times a week, you'll get a fun long-form video and loads more fun content on my other platforms, which you should absolutely follow me on. Folks, thank you again for your support, for watching the video. And folks, as I always say, God bless you and God bless America. Until next time, folks.